By this point, we have just created a scene in our metaverse, just a blank scene with one color, but that's all we've done. In this lesson, we're going to do much more, and I'm going to show you exactly how we can improve this project. And the first thing we're going to do is create an object inside the scene in the metaverse. I'm going to teach you right now how you can do it using the library for Three.js, and it's actually all within the documentation. It's actually very, very easy. So if you go to the documentation, you can scroll down and you'll find this code right here. What we're going to do is we have all the lines we'll need to be able to create an object within the metaverse, in this case, a cube. There's more objects, but in this case, we're going to create a cube, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. We're going to start with the first line of code. We're going to copy that line, and we're going to go over to the Visual Studio, and we're going to paste it into our code. Comment here, we're creating a cube. Now, let me explain to you what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating a cube, and the way we do that is by using a box geometry. This is an object that contains all the points, the vertices, the fill faces of the cube, and we're going to do all of this in this section. Now, these objects are created using a material. To be able to do that, in Three, we need to add a material. In Three, we can actually choose our material, which brings us to our next line. Here's the material. We're going to copy it, and we're going to paste it back in. What we're doing here is we're going to be creating a variable called material that's actually going to establish the mesh basic material, and it's going to assign a color to the material for the box geometry. You see, we're creating a geometry cube, and actually what we're doing is the material is mesh basic material. That's what we're doing. To do this, what we're going to do is we're going to take the last piece, and to do that, we go back and we're constructing a cube. You see, we have the geometry, which is a box geometry. The material is mesh basic material, and cube mixes both the geometry and the material. And this is the initial creation for the cube. But now we need to put it into the scene, or we're not going to be able to see that. So to do that, we're going to actually go back and go for the cube in the scene and give it a position. So this piece of code here, we're going to copy it and we're going to put it back in because we have to have a camera pointing to our object. So we've got the cube in the scene, the same way that we had the background in the scene. Let's actually comment out the background. And we're going to have a cube in the scene, and we're going to look at it from a camera in this position right here. So what you see is the axis is Z, which is established as 5. So the axis is Z, 5, and it looks like this. That's exactly what we got. But this is not a 3D object. It's just basically a 2D object. We don't have any depth. We merely have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. That's all we got. Now, let's give it some depth. And let me tell you exactly how we do that. In order to do that, we have to animate the object. That's how we can do that. I'll show you exactly how to do it. So in the documentation, we're going to find exactly how we can animate the specific cube that we've created. Now, notice we created the rendering. And if you notice, when we're rendering the scene, this is actually going to allow us to animate the scene. This is actually a function that's going to be working regularly and rendering the scene. It's going to keep changing. So we're going to copy that code. We're going to paste it into our code. And now we're animating this function. Let's hit save. And now we're going to look at the metaverse. Well, it's not moving, but why isn't it moving? Let's look at the code. Where are we saying that this thing should move? We haven't actually said it. We need to determine and establish that this object needs to rotate. I can do that by moving the camera, or I can actually make a rotation of the actual object. So let me actually show the way I'm going to define this by cube.rotation to an actual axis, in this case, X. And I'm going to put a value that keeps increasing, 0.1. So every time the animation is rendered, it increases by 0.1. And there you go. Rotating on the X-axis. Now, let's take a look at it here. For example, let's say instead of X, let's rotate on Z. Notice how it changes? Let's rotate on Y. You see how they're different axes? Here I go, let me make some changes. So for example, let me add multiple axes. So here's X and here's Y. Let's actually do it a little slower. I can change that by making it slower or faster. I have a choice. I can change all these values. As you can see, by this point, I'm actually rotating the cube in multiple axes, but I have other options. How about we move the camera, not the cube? So I can do it easily. I can just go camera.position and I can establish the axis as X, and I can have it move by 0.01. Notice how the camera now starts moving. So we've got the cube rotating, but we also have the camera moving. Let's say we want to move it. Let's move it to the other side. I can change that as well. You see, I can move the camera as I wish, okay? So by this point, what we can see is that we can move the object, whether it's the cube being rotated or we're moving the camera. It's our choice. By this point, let's go one step further and let's add some lights. Because to actually look at it, let's put some lights that will actually illuminate the object we have. And we'll do that by declaring a variable. This variable will be ambient underscore light. And we're going to establish the new 3.ambient light. And that's the type of light we're going to be using. And we need to establish the color that we want for this. So let's set up the value. We're going to use this color. In fact, let me just make it white. So I'm creating an ambient light that's white. But is that all that's needed? Actually not. I actually want to go one step further. We've got an ambient light. Let's create another variable. And this one's going to be for a directional light. So it's going to create a directional light. It's going to point at it. So new 3.directional light. And then after I've got the directional light, I need to establish what color I want. So I'm going to use another color. Let's use a different one. How about this code right here? That's the color I'm going to use. Different color. And I'm going to pass a parameter, in this case, 1. Let's see how it looks once we actually go to our browser. Now I've saved it, but you notice that nothing has happened. I need to adapt these lights to actually fit the scene so they're actually visible. It's actually really, really easily explained to do. I simply put ambient light and I take the directional one and I add it to the ambient light. You see, I've got the direction light and I'm adding it to the ambient light. All I'm doing then is I am adding to the scene the ambient light, and all I really need to do is change the material in this object. You see, this object right now is mesh basic material. Let's change it so we can actually see the difference. This is a different material, mesh Phong material, and you're going to be able to see this. At this moment, as you can see, nothing has changed. Well, let's see what's happened. Well, what we're seeing is that the light that we're using as ambient light is not the right one. Let's use a different light. Let's use 40, 40, 40. Ooh, now you see the difference. You see? We see that with this light, we actually see these different lights that are coming from the direction and from the ambient are actually illuminating our object. Let's get rid of this renderer that we don't need. We've got the animation in place. We don't need that extra renderer. And let's look at our code right now. We've got the images. We've got the object itself rotating. We've got the lights. Let's comment it in. Setting the scene lights. Okay, perfect. Now we know exactly what we need. We're going to copy it. We're going to move it right above the cube. Okay, so now we've got a really clean code. Setting the scene lights. We got the cube. We hit save. And we have perfectly working code that sets lights on a three-dimensional object that's a cube. In the following lessons, I'll be teaching you how to take this knowledge and evolve into more advanced concepts.